What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Pro v Pro Open Championship Week, British Open Week. I saw Pat Mayo said the same thing. For SEO purposes, we need to include British Open, but man, that goes against every fiber of my being. It's the Open Championship Week. How are you doing, Justin?
Man, I'm doing great. Crazy week, but yeah, it's I love like waking up and having really good golf to watch in the morning. I don't know why it just hits a little bit different to wake up and have a cup of coffee and watch those guys grinding it out in the wind and the rain and stuff. So I'm looking forward to it. This is maybe my favorite course that they play over there. That hosts these British Opens. So yeah, it'll be. I'm pretty excited. I think it'll be fun and exciting, and we're going to kind of get to see if some of the live guys can come over and play well, and it should be good. Should be a really good golf tournament.
I don't know if I'd want to wake up at 4 a.m. every week to watch golf, but doing it once, maybe twice a year, sure is fun. For this show, we are going to do a ton of course fit discussion. That's going to be basically to accomplish two things. Number one, we want to do the best job we can of breaking down the course so that we pick the best players this week and have the most success in our betting, in our DraftKings, in our underdog plays, all that good stuff. But also, it just enhances the viewing experience when you kind of know what to expect when you're watching. So lots of course fit discussion ahead. Then we'll get into best bets, some DFS discussion, one and done. And of course, we will build not just a 3-pick play on Underdog. We're going to build an 8-pick play on Underdog today. So let's have some fun with that. Justin, before we get into that, I know you wanted to talk about the drop that Robert McIntyre took on Sunday of the Scottish Open. Let's hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so I'm seeing a lot of people. It's kind of like I was telling you backstage, obviously. It bothers me that all these people are like, oh, this guy's a cheater, this guy's that. And it's just so far from the truth, right? So going back and listening to the whole story, which I didn't know people still did this, but he wears metal spikes in his front three of his shoe. I had no idea that was a thing. So he said that he stepped down and he heard the clank and you could hear it, and sure enough, there's a sprinkler head there, and so you get a free relief from that. Listen, I'm not saying it was maybe one of the best breaks you'll ever see in a meaningful moment, right? Like a very, very good break. But there's not one human being that plays professional golf that would not have done the exact same thing that he did. Like to call him out for doing it is more unfair than anything else, because that's in the rules of golf. It's not like it's not like he's moving the sand around, trying to hit a shot. It's a clear cut in the rules of golf. Did he get an unbelievable break? Yes. But the nonsense about him cheating just has to stop.
Yeah, it was a very similar situation, if you remember, to Xander taking a drop earlier this season when he was kind of in trees and had a camera tower or a shot link tower, I think it was, in his way. So he got to move it sideways, chip up close to the green. Same idea. The issue that most fans have, whether they realize it or not, is with the rule itself, not the player. I do think something should be done about the rules where, if you're in that screwed up situation, there should be room for an interpretation like, you know what, the sprinkler head isn't actually affecting your shot here. The lie of where the ball is what's affecting the shot. So you don't get relief from the sprinkler head when there's some other large difficulty to the shot that would be removed. That would be a really difficult thing to legislate, though, so I understand why they haven't done it, but personally, that's what I would like to see.
Well, and so the problem is, in my opinion, you can't go down that rabbit hole, because then you got to take away the bad breaks when you hit really good shots, right? So if you hit a shot right down the middle, it's in a divot, whatnot. Now you're he's being penalized, in the middle of the fairway with good shots. Like at some point, we have to draw the lines of like, what rule are we going to go by? So I think that the argument that I would make for it is that should have been marked hazard, and all the marking hazard does was just take it away from being able to get relief. Like that's literally in the rules of golf now. You can ground your club, you can move stuff. Like it's not like it used to be. So just mark that hazard, and then he doesn't get relief, and your problem solved.
That's a great call. I love that. Yeah. Maybe we'll see that this week. Who knows? But Royal Troon, let's start with the Open Championship fit model instead. For those unfamiliar, what we do every time we get a major championship where the golf course changes from year to year is we run the model our course fit model, instead of running it on the course, we run it on the event history. And when you look at the end result of that model, it tells us a pretty clear story. So for example, when we run the US Open fit model, we get an enormous weight on driving distance, still a very high weight on driving accuracy. Approach plays only slightly down. Around the green was still way up, and then putting was slightly up too. So basically, across the board, we're seeing more predictive value than usual at the US Open, which tells us US Open courses test players in similar ways, even when you go from one course to the next. At the Open Championship, however, we have a strong positive signal on driving distance, 48% more predictive than usual. And we have a strong signal on putting, 23% more predictive than usual. But driving accuracy is 23% down, approach play is 18% down, and around the green is 14% down. Part of the reason for this is that the way that courses have tested players has changed over the last few years. In fact, going back to when Colin Morikawa won, going into that week, we were on the Morikawa outright, even though most of the industry really did not like him that week, because we saw this huge predictive signal in Open Championships on iron play itself. And at the time, he was the clear-cut best iron player in the world. Everything kind of changed when we got to St. Andrews. St. Andrews had this enormous driving distance aspect to it. Putting was a lot higher at St. Andrews as well. And then last year, we saw some of the same, not nearly to the extent that we saw at St. Andrews, but basically all of this comes down to two things. Number one, I think we do want guys who drive the ball well and make putts, or drive the ball far and make putts, I should say. But also, we need to do a little bit of speculation ourselves to figure out how Royal Troon might test players. So Justin, when you look at Royal Troon, what are the things that stand out to you about what skill sets are going to matter the most this week?
I mean, it's just, so I think a lot of the non-predictive, right, is the weather aspect too of you've got so many different weather aspects of not just wind, right, and rain, but how soft the golf course is going to play compared to sometimes it plays super firm. Obviously, we remember the ones that play firm, but there are, if they get a bunch of rain, well, like it may do this week, you might see a little bit softer. Like we were kind of talking about, we got the tail of 2 9s here. So you're looking at somebody that can really take advantage of the easy holes. And then obviously the harder holes, you got to kind of go with a different skill set. It's almost like you are playing two different types of golf courses. So I'm going to lean just kind of like what I do of all the time is just a guy that drives it really good. Is where I'm going to start. And then from there, I'm going to make sure that I've got guys that I know are going to be a little bit of a grinder as well, that just have more of a grinder mentality, because I think that's ultimately what it comes down to in most British Opens. If I remember right, Troon is where Stenson won, and he hit 3-wood all the way around the golf course, was hitting that like bullet 3-wood pretty much the entire golf tournament. So obviously you don't have to get out there and mash driver everywhere if he won it. Now, given he hit his 3-wood further than most people do hit a driver. But, I just think it's going to come down to, like everything else, is going to have to watch the weather. And I'm going to go with the guy that's going to drive it really well and give himself opportunities, because and then you're going to get a lot of chances to hit wedges. If you drive it well, there are some places that you get wedges around this place. And, they have the really short par 3 that's another wedge. So, I'm going to look for guys that are pretty good, inside 150 yards, because you have to take advantage of that stuff here.
As you mentioned, the last time we saw Troon host the Open Championship, Stenson ran away from the pack at 20 under. Phil was at 17, and yet the cut was +4. Third place, I think, was JB Holmes at -7. So the winning scores were fantastic, but Stenson and Phil were just in a different world that week, both literally and figuratively, because there was a weather pattern that was just extremely easy for this like 1 hour long pocket of tee times, where so many of those guys ended up at the top of the leaderboard, which, to your point, the weather is just significantly more impactful here than most places. Looking at the expected weather report, pretty consistent winds on Thursday. Friday looks like we could get some wind at times, some downwind at times. I'll also say I've checked the weather report like 5-6 times over the last 3 days. I think I've seen completely different reports every single time I've checked it. So by no means should you take what I'm telling you right now when it comes to the weather report as fact. It's going to change, and we should continue to monitor it because the weather is going to be extremely impactful. And I think part of that too, the as you mentioned, like it's a tale of two nines. Basically, the entire front nine plays downwind with the prevailing wind. We don't know that we'll get the prevailing wind, but assuming we do, every single hole except for number 8, the postage stamp, should play downwind on the front, and then almost every single hole on the back plays back into the wind. The back 9, the holes themselves are also more difficult. So you get that tale of two nines, but you can see then how like certain pockets could end up getting huge advantages where if you're on the course for the strongest wind when it's downwind and then you turn back into the wind and all of a sudden the wind lays down, like that's the pocket you want to be in, right? And so it's just there's more randomness in that way, but we also, once we're then closer to the tee times, we'll have the chance to pick up on that and predict what's going to happen in that regard. And so it's not like it's just completely variance that we can do nothing about, but this far out, we're kind of at the mercy of what the weather ends up doing.
And I think this just leads back into let's just find the value on the guys that we know are more talented maybe than their number is, or their price, whichever way you want to look at it. Where are the guys, that we know can get it done, and maybe the value there then becomes on just relying on them having a better skill set than maybe the other players. That we always end up back to the same 10 to 12 guys that we see as just kind of undervalued because of their overall, what we know what they can do, right? We know what how high their ceiling is. So that's what I'm going to be looking for here is the guys with the highest ceiling that are just completely mispriced.
Before we get into specific plays, I want to do one last thing with Course Fit. Let's go through the Open Championship model and kind of talk through what aspects could play the same as past Open Championships, what could be different, and what about the golf course makes it that way. So, for example, I think the driving distance is going to be really important this week, and I think it could be extremely important. So, again, we have it about plus 50%. At the U.S. Open, we saw it over 100%. We've seen over 100% before. I think this could be another week where we actually get over 100% emphasis on driving distance. Basically, what that means, it's over 100% more predictive than usual on just on any tour average week. And the reason why I think it could be so impactful this week is because of the fairway bunkers. They're not all the traditional pop bunkers that we see so often in Open Championships. Some look more like American golf course bunkers, but they mostly play the same way where they're just so deep that if you're in them, it's not like it is in America where, okay, I'm in a fairway bunker. It's probably better than thick rough because I can spin it from here. No, when you're in the fairway bunkers at Royal Troon, just like most links courses and European courses, you're probably laying up. So the ability to take certain bunkers out of play because you can just bomb it over them is so helpful. And there are also a number of holes here where there's just enough of a dog leg that, a 20% increase in driving distance plays like 30 to 40 because you're able to cut the corner. So I think driving distance is going to be super important here at Royal Troon. Do you have any additional thoughts on driving, including maybe some driving accuracy thoughts?
I think that you're pretty much exactly what I was thinking, right? To be able to hit it over these bunkers and just to be able to be a little bit more aggressive is just such a huge deal anywhere we go nowadays, but especially places like this. So, I'll also just kind of go into guys that I know are pretty good in the 3 to 6, 7 foot range putting, because I think you'll see whether it be for birdie going downwind or for par coming back into the wind. I think you kind of just end up seeing a lot of those type of putts. And I think that kind of showed last week of with the undulation of the greens last week at the Scottish of hey, there was a lot of 4 to 6 foot par putts that Oberg hold early in the week and didn't hole on Sunday. So I think you'll see that same idea here.
We have these negative weights on driving accuracy, approach play, and around the green play. If any one of those three skill sets is more predictive than at past Open Championships, which one do you think it would be?
I think it'll be iron play will be more predictive. I think it's hard with the around the green stuff because once again, we talk about this all the time. You'll see a putter used a lot more than chipping. So I will, I think that's just general rule of thumb, whether it's windy or with just the runoffs in general, right? So I think you'll see putter a lot more. So I probably won't lean into around the green. I think it would be iron play for me.
Interesting. See, I'm going to take the opposite stance here, actually. I'm going to say if one of these was more predictive, I think it would be around the green play. A couple of reasons for this. Number one, I did a show with Pat Mayo on, I think he came out like last Monday, where I was playing Royal Troon on a simulator. And I got to tell you, I've played Royal Troon on a simulator a lot since then, just because it was so much fun. I wanted to keep doing it. As I learned more about the golf course and how I expected to play this week, I would change the settings, play it all different ways. One of the things that stood out to me the most as I played it over and over again was I didn't have a whole lot of short game shots that weren't bunker shots. And part of that is because around these greens, there are a lot of Pinehurst-like slopes where you think, okay, that ball's going to stop on the left center of the green. That's a good shot. And then, it just rolls off and rolls off. And almost everything that rolls off of the green flows naturally into a bunker. So one thing I didn't get there is, I'm always hitting off a mat on the simulator. So I'm not getting the shots out of like the long rough where my only shot is to lay up to the front of the green where I'm probably then getting a little pitch shot from there. So it's not like it's always going to be the case for every player that all of their short game shots are bunker shots, but I do think we're going to see a lot of bunker shots. And part of that is also, we've talked about it before with around the green. There's a course management type signal when it comes to around the green play where you are making sure that the bunker that you're going into is one that's playable from, right? It's you have enough green to work with to stop the ball. You are less likely to be, right up against the face of that bunker, chipping out sideways because you know which bunkers are deep and penalizing and which ones are a little bit more shallow and doable. All of those things combined to tell me I think around the green play will be somewhat important this week. But to that effect, I would say that's going to be more and more the case the more the wind blows. Because there is a chance, I think, on this golf course where you can just drive it well enough if the conditions are benign that you're able to hit the ball pretty close. And then to your point, it would be as much about iron play as driving it, where I'm saying if the course is a little bit more difficult as it played the last time we saw it here, I think it would be more distance off the tee. Around the green might even be second to me before putting it.
So the reason I think that around the green, you kind of hit on this, right, is that your ball can roll into bunkers and not have a shot, right? So even the best bunker players in the world may have to hit it out sideways. So you're not, even they might be the best bunker player so you hit a really good shot that's just a pitch out shot, right? You're not really getting to take advantage of what you do well. And I think, like to your point, if you get all these funneling in, let's say they all funnel in, but the golf course isn't super firm and fast, that means they're more likely to be right by the edge and less likely to have any shot whatsoever at all. Mm-hmm. So, once again, it depends on how firm and fast we see the golf course and how much it rolls off. Because if they go into the bunker with any speed, then I agree, because you're probably going to have a chance to hit a good bunker shot. But if the ball is just barely dripping into these bunkers, you're going to be chipping it out sideways anyway.
All right. That's enough about the potential course fit. The interesting thing is, as we turn to the betting market itself, I think there are a handful of guys that I'm interested in, like almost regardless of what the course fit actually looks like, because there are just some guys that I think are dramatically underpriced. So to go through my betting card so far, going into the week, I had futures on two players. I had Russell Henley at 125 to 1, Wyndham Clark at 100 to 1. Henley has actually gone up to 150. Wyndham Clark is down to 80 at best. So let's start there with those two guys. What do you think of the numbers I got with the future, 125 and 100? And how do you feel about the current numbers, 150 for Henley, 80 for Wyndham?
Will you let me buy part of that Wyndham Clark ticket?
Dude, that's 100 to 1. Are you kidding me? For a guy who's now, I don't know if he completely finished top 10. He might have finished like 11th this week or something, but basically back-to-back top 10s. It looks like his game is back. The putter's on fire, and it's Wyndham Clark. We've seen him dominate fields like this. So 100 to 1 is absolutely nuts on him.
Yeah. As most people know, I don't have the access to all the books that you have. So I was looking at, I had up DraftKings lines just to look at as well. The Russell Henley one, I don't really have a opinion on. Like we know he can win. We know he has the ability to play. I just think Wyndham Clark's upside is just, he's one of those elite players, I think, that has the upside that they could get it done for sure.
How strange is this? So right now, the best available using the prop shop at FTN Fantasy for Wyndham Clark is 66 to 1. However, at Bet365, the 66 is for an each way with 1/5 odds for 8 spots. If you go to the 1/4 odds for 5 spots, it does boost up to 80, which is where I'm saying that 80 is still available. That I have the 100, by the way, 1/4 payout for 5 spots. And yet, so 66 on Bet Rivers, 66 on MGM, 66 on Bet365, 65 on FanDuel, 60 on DraftKings, and then Caesars in its own little world, 33 to 1 for Wyndham Clark. I've never seen a discrepancy like that. And I think Wyndham isn't that far off of 33, but regardless, that's just so weird to see.
So I do think this is where the human element comes into some for like a place like Caesars. I think they probably either know they're going to get hammered with Wyndham Clark money or have already got hammered with Wyndham Clark money. There's a reason, in my opinion, they weren't just like, oh, we're just going to make this guy 33, right? There's been some action there, some way to move that line to get it down that low.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's also possible that we're pulling a stale line. Who knows? But funny to see regardless. Russell Henley is I think a weirder one. So my thought process with Henley is basically that I don't think there are many guys who are just better from an all-around perspective. The one thing he obviously lacks is distance. But man, I can't tell you like how many times we have seen Henley go to a golf course where distance is super predictive. He just plays the golf course in his own way and ends up at the top of the leaderboard. Despite that fact, including, by the way, at the U.S. Open. He did it again at the U.S. Open. So I'm just going to continue to back him. And I don't know, man. Like I know that he doesn't have a great history at the Open Championship. Not really something I care that much about. I care far more about course fit itself. I think that Henley is just undervalued once again. And so I still really like him at that 125 number. I think I'd like him all the way to like 75, honestly.
Yeah. So, and I think that if we get firmer, faster, kind of grinded out conditions, I think that's when I think all your value lies with Henley is if we get that going where your ball is getting some rollout, because then his ball, obviously, he catches up to a lot of guys that hit it a lot further. And then if it plays really hard, like he's one of those guys that'll just kind of put his nose to the grindstone and get after it.
Yeah. The one guy that I have bet this week is Sam Burns at 180 to 1. So to start, let's remember what the Open Championship model is telling us. Distance and putting more predictive than usual. Everything else a little bit less predictive than usual. What are the things that Sam Burns does well? Hits the ball a long way, and he makes a ton of putts. The other thing I mentioned is I think that around the green play could be more predictive than usual this week. Sam Burns, like we have given so much credit to Colin Morikawa for the improvement that he has made in his short game. Sam Burns has made a similar improvement. It hasn't been as sustained throughout the season, which is why it hasn't gotten the same attention, at least from us, that we have given Morikawa's. But 5 straight events gaining around the green. He gained over a stroke per round at the Memorial, over half a stroke per round at the U.S. Open, and then 3/4 of a stroke per round at the Travelers with his short game alone. So it really has been spectacular. The distance is still there, obviously. And the putter hasn't been as consistent this season as it has in the past, but he just gained almost 2 strokes per round at the U.S. Open. It's obviously still capable of getting hot. So I really like this Sam Burns number. And we have talked before a bunch about how some guys just have the skill of knowing how to win. Sam Burns is one of the guys that is always our go-to of somebody who very clearly has that skill. So if he finds himself in contention, I really like his chances of closing it out. Unlike guys like Eric Van Rooyen, who we have been on in the past few weeks, despite knowing if he gets in contention, you're going to see the 3 putts come out. I don't have that same worry with Burns.
Yeah, and like I think when you look at guys that are these higher odds, you want a guy that you know can win, and I think I think you have to put Keegan Bradley in that same conversation. I think I like Burns a little bit better this week, but they're hanging. I mean, DraftKings has Keegan at 170. Like that's just too high for a guy like that.
He's 225 on Bet365, 220 on FanDuel, and on Bet365 you can go to the 1/4 for 5 spots option. I think it was either 250 or maybe even 275 with that option. So yeah, I like this Keegan call as well. Not quite the course fit, but there are a lot of guys. I think Keegan is a perfect one to include in this. Also, like Billy Horschel, someone I looked at, Ryan Fox, Benny On, available 190 at Bet365, where I don't want to make that bet right now, but what I want to do is I want to keep that player in mind such that once we get tee time, so once we have a little bit better sense of what portions of the tee times might end up with the best draw, if any of those guys fit in there, then it becomes an auto bet. So whether that's Benny On, whether it's Keegan Bradley, like I think that's the group that I would put Keegan in, but certainly that number in and of itself is, I think, undervaluing Keegan, in part because we just know that like when Keegan's on, the ceiling is high enough to win in a field like this, even if some of the best players are playing well.
And I'm going to throw another name into that mix that's way overpriced, and that's Matthew Pavon. He's way up there, and we've seen that he's a better player this year than what he has been. He's figured out how to win. He's been in. I mean, I know he didn't play very good last week, which that doesn't bother me very much here. I just take a guy like that we know he has a ceiling at a super high number. If we get the tee times and it looks like he's going to have a good draw, I think he fits that same overpriced model.
I've got an interesting one for you. What about Matt Wallace?
So I looked at him up there. He was listed right by Pavon, and I was looking at. He's one of those guys that I struggle with to figure out. I've been pretty vocal about. There's a few guys that I just don't know. Denny McCarthy's another one of those guys I just can't ever figure out. Like I just don't ever have a really good take on him. I mean, obviously Wallace is super talented. He's shown that before. I just think that if I had to pick somebody in that in those higher price range, I'm going to go with somebody that I know can win and has proven it lately. There was another name that stood out down there, and that's Montecero. I like him on DraftKings better than I like him as an outright. He's like 5,400 on DraftKings, way underpriced for a guy that's been playing, that's obviously turned it around this year and gotten kind of back to his old form.
So the reason I brought up Wallace is because historically he has really fit that mold of like distance off the tee and putting. And yet lately the distance advantage has almost completely disappeared. I'm assuming that he's made some kind of change to try and drive the ball more accurately, because accuracy off the tee has always been his biggest limiting factor. But then also back-to-back missed cuts at the Rocket Mortgage and the Scottish Open, where his putter was just a complete disaster. So that explains the drop in price to as high as 350 to 1 on FanDuel, which I think is an overcorrection. But man, if you're going to bet on him and you're going to hope that he gets in contention, it's going to have to be a complete 180 on the putter. And you're probably going to need him to take a more aggressive approach off the tee. So I don't think I like the number, but that it was one of those numbers where as soon as I saw it, it was like, wow, that's a lot higher than I expected to see. So I need to look into this. But the more I looked into it, it's not like I'm overly excited about it. So there are some really interesting high numbers this week. And again, I think if you think they end up in the perfect weather draw, it's always worth taking a chance in that case.
Yeah, they're definitely hanging high numbers on some guys that I think could win. So It's super interesting. I was just kind of looking through my odds compared to what DraftKings has and what I have available. My problem is like all of mine get cut off at 100 to 1. So the highest you get is 100 to 1. So I don't get any really big numbers. So with mine, I was just kind of looking below. I think John Rahm at 25 to 1, it seems pretty high to me. Like that stood out. I understand he's not having a good year, but he's talented enough. He's going to figure it out, in my opinion. I don't know if it'll be this week or not, but that's just too high of a number, in my opinion. I think Thagala's number is too high. There's a couple others. Do you have anybody in your, I don't want to call them favorites because really, obviously you have Scheffler at 5 to 1 or whatever is your clear cut favorite. And then after that, I mean, I think Rory plays good this week. Like if I'm probably going to throw Scheffler out on DraftKings and start with Rory. So I still don't, I'm as an outright, 9 to 1 doesn't do anything for me is what I've got.
For everyone near the top of the board, I do want to wait on the projections and the sim to finish. And we don't have those just yet. We have a very good idea of who projects well. And, we know each player's strokes gain profile. We know who putts well. We know who hits the ball far, all that sort of stuff. But when it comes to the detail required to make really good bets at the top of the board, I want to wait for those actual simulation results. So I will agree, though, with you that I think Rory is a very intriguing option this week. I hardly ever place outrights in that range, and I don't think I would be doing that again this week. But, man, on DraftKings, particularly if he slips through the cracks a little bit because people want Scotty so much more than him, or they want to go to Xander or Oberg, man, Rory would look so good. He's driving the ball incredibly well. He gained over 2 strokes per round at the U.S. Open, gained well over a stroke and a half per round at the Genesis Scottish Open. His around the green play has been spectacular, and he putted poorly at the Scottish, but not nearly as poorly as it seemed like he was putting, because it seemed a lot of the time like, oh, they were showing Rory. Well, he just missed a 6-foot putt. I thought a lot of the ones that we saw were quite difficult putts. He only lost 0.3 per round, and prior to that, he was spectacular with the putter at the Wells Fargo, spectacular with the putter at the Canadian Open, solid at both the Memorial and the U.S. Open up until those last few putts that cost him the U.S. Open. But so there are so many people right now saying Rory's not a good putter. Rory's putter's going to let him down. You know what? It has in some key moments over the last few years, but this guy is a good putter. And if off the tee is as important this week as I think it's going to be particularly distance, then definitely like going back to Rory. So I think that's more of a DFS play for me, though.
Yeah, I don't like to put outrights at guys that short anyway. Like I would say even the Rahm at 24, 5 to 1 is like about as low as I'm going to go on the board. I have an interesting one, and I'd love to hear your take, and that's Cameron Smith. He kind of checks some of these boxes with putting, and we know he can compete in this type of golf. I think I saw he's around 50 to 1, depending on where you get it. I just like do you think that the books undervalue these guys from LIV coming back over, and that plays any part in that being a little bit higher number than, I expected him to be mid to low 30s, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, I do think there's something to the idea that books might underprice these guys. After all, we got Bryson at 46 to 1 for the U.S. Open, right? Like that number would never have existed if he had still been on the PGA Tour. So I think there could be something to that. I don't view Cam Smith as like this fantastic course fit, but man, I do think there's a very good chance that he's undervalued. And I think the big thing for him is just going to be avoiding bunkers off the tee. If he either has a game plan to avoid bunkers, or if he's driving it well enough to avoid the bunkers, then we should never, ever, ever be shocked if he's in contention, because outside of driving, he's as good as anybody in the world. So yeah, I think he's probably a little bit undervalued at that 45 number that I'm seeing at Bet Rivers. I think he's also available at 45 on Bet365 with the 1/4 4/5 spots each way. So I like both of those for him, but I don't like them enough to place them yet. That's another guy. Number one, I want to see what the projections say. And number two, I want to see if there's potentially, a weather angle we're taking this week. And if he were to fit that weather angle, auto bet.
Yeah. Do you? And I don't know the answer to this. Or I don't even know. And will the odds change when they come out with tee times? If they see, will the books adjust to that, or do you think they'll just kind of keep it?
I don't think books will automatically adjust for it. I think what could happen is there could be other people seeing the same thing as us, and so certain pockets of the tee times will get bet harder than others, and that would make their numbers obviously adjust. But that's something I think that we can be kind of first to market to once odds come out. Let's take a look at the weather. And it also could be, let's take a look at the weather before tee times come out, and then maybe we're able to identify ahead of time, okay, this is the hour that we want, because on Thursday that means they have some breeze downwind, and by the time they turn into the wind, it's late afternoon, the wind is down, obviously making up. I don't know that that's going to be the case yet, but that's the sort of thing that we can look out for ahead of time, and then maybe really be first to market on those bets.
Because everybody tees off of one, right? And it's just continuous tee times. This isn't. Yep. There's no waves here, so to speak.
Right.
So it is a little bit different than conventional. What we're used to over here is a morning and afternoon draw.
And what I'm not 100% sure of in the U.S. when you get everybody off of number one, you do still have waves in the sense that like the first player off in the morning on Thursday would not be the last player off on Friday. Right. They'd be the first off in the latter half of the field. So I don't know if we get the same sort of thing.
I'm 98% sure that's exactly how it works. So yeah,
if you're so too, but it's worth confirming.
Yeah, if you're the last tee time in the morning wave, so to speak, the first day, you're going to be the very last tee time off the second day. So and I would have to look at the field size to see exactly what tee time that is, but when it comes out, it'll be pretty easy to see who's where. So like you said, I think there's just so much to do with weather this week that there's so many guys that we know can't lay 50-1. I mean, if can't lays 50-1 and he gets a even decent draw, like I'm going to be intrigued by that because we know he's capable of being a world-class player as well.
Man, I have no idea what to think of Cantlay. Absolutely none. Because he now has played two very, very solid events in a row. And it's not just that, he was good in those events. He finished third at the U.S. Open, fifth at the Travelers. It's that he gained in every single category in both events, over half a stroke per round off the tee. Was spectacular with his irons at the U.S. Open, was still pretty good with them at the Travelers, was solid around the green in both, and the putter was spectacularly hot in both events. So, man, like I've said it before, I think one of the most difficult things for our modeling process to do is to be quick enough to adjust the elite players back to their elite baseline after they've gone through like an extended slump. Cantlay has not been very good this season. His results haven't been quite as bad as I thought, but particularly he just hasn't been himself off the tee this year, which really hasn't allowed him to take advantage of his strong iron play. The putter has been extremely inconsistent. It's still great when it's on, but he's had far more weeks like at the Memorial where he got cut in part because he lost over a stroke per round with both the driver and the putter. It's just been a weird year for him. So I do think we're probably going to underproject him, but I also think that the field might be a little bit too quick to just say, oh, he's played 2 good weeks in a row. He's probably going to play a third good week in a row, and maybe we still see more of the Cantlay that we've seen all year, which has just been this surprisingly inconsistent lack of a ceiling type player.
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's too high of a number for a guy that's trending in the right direction that is an elite player. I think that's my biggest point, right? We know he's an elite player. We know he can get it done, and it's just the 50-1. I just think the way that I always look at it is if we play this event in everybody's current form, could he win this event 1 out of 50? And I think that unequivocally that's yes.
I do agree with that. If you could only make one bet, same number, Cam Smith or Patrick Cantlay?
Man, that's a terrible question because I like both those guys a lot this week. I think probably Cam Smith, and that's just because I find it easier to root for Cam Smith than I do Patrick Cantlay, right? And every time I think about Cam Smith, I just think about the elite shot that he hit at the Players to win that chip, into the grain so hard, with everything on the line, and Cam Smith hadn't really made it at that point, in my opinion. So I think that knowing that he's got stones, that he can get the job done, I think I would probably go with Cam Smith.
Like Sam Burns, Cam Smith, one of those guys that's a go-to for us when we're talking about guys that we know have the skill of knowing how to win. So I do agree there. Let's jump to the DFS side of things. Very interesting pricing again this week. We have Scotty leading the way at $12,800. Then a big drop, Bryson, second most expensive, passing that Rory and Xander pairing that we've so often seen. But now the three of them are in the mid 11,000s. Then another big drop to Rahm, Oberg, Morikawa. First question, in that top tier, how likely do you think you are to get all the way to Scotty? And if you don't go to Scotty, are you trying to go to that 11,000 range and hope that one of Bryson, Rory, or Xander's under owned? Or are you just saying, okay, if I'm not getting to Scotty, I'm going to go more balanced and try to get, two of Rahm, Oberg, Morikawa, something like that? What are your thoughts up top?
I think that the only guy that I'm going to play up there is going to be Rory. I do expect to have a decent amount of ownership of Rory. I don't know how much, to be honest, but I just think that he's playing really well, and I'm hoping that he kind of falls through the cracks because everybody, like you said, the media has just been like, oh, he can't putt, and then plus the letdown at the U.S. Open. I wonder if he doesn't just go a little bit overlooked.
It's so interesting because I'm completely with you on Rory. Love his outlook this week, and I do think he's going to be contrarian, which is part of why I love him so much. But I also think there's a chance that we're going to, I'll run ownership tomorrow and say, oh, guess not. Guess everyone has the exact same thought, and then suddenly I won't be on Rory as much. So very curious to see what ownership says. But yeah, well, let's start here. What do you think the field will do with Scotty, and what is your interpretation of what? I mean, I think this is going to be 4 weeks off for him. We haven't seen him since the Travelers. Do you think there's any concern that Scotty, maybe he hasn't been practicing as much? He's got a new kid. Do you think we'll see any kind of rust with him? And do you think that the field will be a little afraid of how long he's taken off?
I think that if I wasn't so set on where Rory stood and thinking that as much as the numbers, but just believing that this might be the right place to just be all in on the Rory side of things, I would not be scared of Scotty Scheffler at all because he has proven time and time again that he could come out and make 3 bogeys the first 9 holes and then figure it out. And the next thing you know, he's got back-to-back 66s to finish third on Sunday, he's just a different monster than what we've seen. And until he proves otherwise, I just think he's kind of one of those guys you either have to be all in on or just have to go another direction. And I think they have they haven't priced high enough that I think I would rather go down, 1,000 or 1,400 to Rory.
Okay, let me ask a different question because I think that was a fantastic point, by the way. Would you rather have an opportunity to play a $12,800 Scotty Scheffler at, let's say, 20% or an $11,400 Rory at 10%?
I mean, yeah, it's not even close. I would take Rory with the lower owned and the lower price tag. I think that his upside is there. And if you sign me up right now for all of the 10% Rory pretty much anywhere.
Yeah. If they were the same ownership, are you still going Rory?
I think it would come down to more lineup construction at that point, of how I value some of because I didn't have anybody in the 6,000 range that I was like, ooh, this guy is just severely underpriced. I need to have him. So I think it would come down to, do I have somebody down there that I could pair with Scotty to make it all work? because the thing is, you can fit a lot of these lower 7 guys into this lineup with Rory that are still huge upside. Burns, Thagala, all, you know, the guys that we always talk about, you can fit them in lineups with Rory, and where it's a little bit harder to do that with a balanced lineup and then go all the way to Scotty.
Yeah, it's a good point. I will say though, I think if Scotty is 20% anything that low, he's going to completely break the GPP scores. So I think I'm leaning towards Rory, but that's in part just about my expectation about where ownership will be. If Scotty comes in a little bit lower than I expect, I will have absolutely no issue making that change and just finding a way to get Scotty, in part because there are some really, really good options at cheap price tags. So my next question for you is going to be what price range stands out to you the most, but I can give you my answer right away. It's Wyndham at 8,000 and then just a completely loaded $7,000 range. We have Minwoo Lee, we have Cam Young, we have, I'm guessing you're going to like Joaquin Neiman this week. We've got Sahith Theegala at 7,200, Corey Connors 73. It's going to be really easy to fit Scotty, which is in part why I think he's going to be pretty high owned, because the $7,000 range, even the 6K range, kind of loaded.
Yeah, and the one that stood out to me was the upper 6s as well. Like after you get below, let's call it 7,000. Of course, it just shut down. It's right on cue. Once you get below like 6,700, I didn't really see anybody the rest of the way down that really stood out to me. I mean, obviously everybody knows I like Keegan at 66, but the 67, Hogard played good this week for 3 rounds, which is kind of one of the guys that I said that I liked going into the week. He kind of fits again this week. Scott obviously played really well. You have Henley right there. Yep. Oosthuizen's going to go way overlooked in a place that he can play well at. I think he's going to be super low owned at 6,800. And then obviously everybody knows how we feel about Siwoo. And then you've mentioned Ryan Fox right there. Like, we know he's showed that he can compete this year. Davis Thompson at 6,900. There's just a lot of guys right there that are going to come down to ownership, because I don't mind being on either one of those guys, on or Scott.
Yeah, I like the fact that there are so many in this range, because I think Sungjae at 69, given how well he has played lately, is going to be massive chalk. And I would guess right now, and I'm pretty confident about this, the most popular duo will be Scotty Sungjae. I think that they might blow everybody else out of the water when it comes to combined ownership for a pairing there. But yeah, to your point, like, even you can go lower and find some guys. Denny 64, Tom Hoagie 64, Kitayama 63, coming off a nice week. Adam Hadwin has been playing pretty solid golf at 63. So there are options. Ben Griffin 5,900 has been playing well. Your boy Austin Eckroat 5,700. So there are options. Again, it's just going to make it so much easier to pick Scotty, to pick multiple guys in that 11,000 range. I think Morikawa once again will be really popular. Morikawa, by the way, might be popular as a second man in, whether it's Bryson and Morikawa, Rory Morikawa. Maybe people will even go to Scotty and Morikawa, given how cheap some of these other guys are. So we're going to see a lot of those types of lineups. The thing that I don't think we'll see a lot of is people loading up on the rest of the $9,000 range. I think, for example, Cantlay, Koepka, Hatton at 95, Hovland 97. I think all those guys are going to be pretty low owned. And then the upper 8s as well. Cam Smith, Hideki. I think those guys are going to have really, really good GPP scores, because the pricing is pushing people to studs and then 6 and 7Ks. And that 8K, 9K range outside of Morikawa, I think, will be largely unowned. So I have a feeling that we will be building in that range, even though there's so many plays in the 7 and 6Ks that we like quite a bit.
So what's your thoughts about starting a line with, like starting with an Oberg, for instance? Obvious huge meltdown this week. Does he recover? He's young. Everybody knows how talented he is. Do you ever go down the road where you can literally build a lineup like you were just talking about? You you could build Oberg, Cam Smith, Cantlay all into one and never spend less than, 6,900 in the lineup, because the low sevens are, Thagala. You could put Thagala, Burns with those guys and really build a strong line.
Yeah. So this is a very interesting question, because I think you can answer this in multiple ways. If, for example, like, I think that the two guys who stand out to me the most as guys that I expect to have some really high GPP scores are Cam Smith and Hideki Matsuyama. And that's in large part because Hideki did not play well this past week, and he was already low owned last week. So I think he will be low owned. Cam Smith has been low owned pretty much every single major. And yet you can start Scotty, Cam Smith, Hideki. That still gives you 66, which, that could be Benny on, Russell Henley, and Kurt Kitayama or something like that, right? So, like, you can still build really solid lineups if Scotty's in there. But if you go to the guy you asked about, Oberg, now you're still left with 75. So now you can go Wyndham Clark, Sahith Theegala, and somebody else in that $7,000 range. So,
Burns, right there. You could go Burns, Thagala, like Clark. You know what I'm saying? So I just I think it'll be interesting to see these GPP scores coming out.
Mm-hmm.
I almost wish that Oberg would have played his tournament the opposite way, right? That he would have come running at the end rather than. But I also think that if he plays it the opposite way, his ownership goes up this week. So I think if you believe that he is talented enough to go, hey, I didn't get it done, but I did what I wanted to do to prepare for this week, man, get a sub 10%. Mm-hmm. Oberg there, like upside, and being able to build around him, and like you said, a Cam Smith or a Cantlay to go with Burns and Thagala. Like I just really think you could do some damage there.
I'll tell you who's going to have a high GPP score at the top. He's not going to project anywhere near as well as the other guys over $10,000, but John Rahm is going to be low owned, and he's going to have a really solid GPP score as a result. So even if Oberg does end up more popular than you'd like because of how he played this past week, you can just make that pivot to John Rahm for $300 more. With that, I think we've done a pretty good job of getting through all of the DFS landscape of the week. Let's talk a little bit of one and done. I mean, we're not doing poorly, but it seemed like our guy EVR could have had a nice week this past week, and then just an atrocious Sunday. At the end of the day, though, it didn't really matter. We didn't move at all in the standings because all that matters are these events with large purses. So what are you thinking this week? I can tell you I have a pretty I feel very strongly about what we should do, but I want to hear what your thoughts are first.
I mean, so I don't have that access to the data. I think we had the live guys we have left, right, are Rahm and Neiman.
We have Bryson.
And we have Bryson as well.
Mm-hmm. We don't have Rahm. We used Rahm at the PGA Championship. So we have Bryson available.
Oh, Bryson. Yeah.
Yeah. At the top, we have, let's see. We have Cantlay, Bryson, Hideki, Homa, Finau, Tom Kim, Henley, and Fitzpatrick. Those are the guys in the top 20 of the world rankings that we still have.
I mean, we obviously have to have a win, I think, to be anywhere near back to competitive. Do you have I'm guessing your opinion is going to be based on ownership.
Kind of. It's about game theory, but it's not necessarily about ownership this week. So my thought is that we should use Bryson DeChambeau. And the reason I think this is because we did not take him at the U.S. Open. And so if you remember, we were about 500th place before that, and we fell to about 22,000th or 2,200th after Bryson won the U.S. Open and we didn't have him. So we have to make up ground on a ton of people. Bryson obviously has a ton of win equity. The nice thing about using Bryson, if we got that win, is he going to be super low owned this week? No. Is he going to be low owned this week amongst the players who are above us? Yes. Why? Because they're above us in large part because they had Bryson's U.S. Open victory. So in order to catch all those people, and remember, he was like 25% owned that week. I think he was the most popular play any week this season. All the people above us don't have Bryson. So I think the easiest way to catch them is to use Bryson. Similar, by the way, to how we had a really nice advantage early in the season because we had Scotty's victory. That advantage kind of slipped away because he just kept winning. So anybody who used him any week with an elevated event got a Scotty win. I think we could go for the exact same thing with Bryson. That US Open victory for people becomes a lot less valuable if he wins again.
Yeah, I mean, and he's obviously the most talented right now. The way he's driving it is the best in the world, and with all the expectations.
And we think distance and putting is going to be predictive here again. So that's what Bryson does.
Yeah, I mean, if like looking back at this year, we're gonna kind of probably kick ourselves because I would say the name of the eventual winner came up in our conversation probably doubled the amount of times that we actually had the winner. Yeah. Bryson, obviously we were all set on playing Bryson at the US Open, and I think ownership kind of pushed us off. Last week I was pretty high on McIntyre. He won there. You had a week where the week before we had Davis Thompson, you had somebody picked out and that ended up winning. So we've had we've talked about the right guys. We just haven't got the right guys to get it done when we've talked about it.
And I think part of that too, by the way, is, we took a lot of chances early in the season. So for example, like we had a 1% owned Rory at the AT&T Pebble Beach elevated event. And he was 6 under through like 13 holes and in first place by 2 strokes. And it looked like, oh man, 1% Rory leading the golf tournament. Like this is spectacular. And then he just completely shits the bed the rest of the way. With a few of those contrarian picks early in the year, we were also way ahead of the game on Thigala. He doesn't have a win, but
yeah, I mean we've done a lot of good things.
But yeah, I think that major point being, if we had been in 200th place or 100th place instead of 500th at the US Open, we wouldn't have shied away from Bryson. Bryson was our thought for the US Open all season long. Had we been in slightly better position, we would have just stuck to that. We felt like we weren't in a position where we could be that chalky where, getting that Bryson win probably would have taken us from 500th place to 300th or something like that. Whereas had we been in 200th, that takes us to 50th or something like that. And then it becomes absolutely worth it. So part of it is just we were so close to being in position to be as chalky as we wanted to be, in which case we would have had a couple more wins and we would have really been up there. So 1 or 2 events early in the season goes our way and we'd be right there. Instead, we got to be a little bit contrarian, or we have to just really lean into the game theory. And I think in this case, Bryson does a great job of that. And then we still have some elevated events that we can be contrarian with at the end to really try and make that last second push.
Well, and I think that also it's been a learning experience for both of us playing the one and done with the elevated events and realizing how important those collective events are compared to picking a winner of, say, the John Deere Classic. It's just a different monster. So, I think we had the right track and we're learning and maybe we can get a Bryson win this week and then be back in it.
All right, let's build a 3-pick play on Underdog. I know where I want to start. As we always do, we go to the birdies and bogeys. Josh has once again given me the data, and we have just under 3 birdies per round the last time that we were at Troon. So I think these 3.5 numbers are pretty good. Like, I think they're well priced, but we can find some guys who make a lot of birdies, and we can find some guys who make a lot of birdies that also have that 1.1x multiplier. Pair them with some bogey plays that I really like, and we'll get some fantastic payouts this week. So, Justin, as I go down through the board, you see we start at 4.0 with the 0.9x, so we can kind of just scroll past all those guys. That's not what we're looking for.
I mean, I like you got to look at the under of a couple of these guys. Shoffley, maybe if they get especially if it looks like the weather is going to be somewhat tough. So you get a boosted lower there. I don't mind, especially when we get to these 8 picks, if we're going to do something and really try to hit a home run, like the under 4 Xander there with 1.1 boost, like it has my attention a little bit.
Yeah, I think that's a good call, especially one thing I'll say is we will probably come up with an entirely new round of plays once we get the tee times and have a sense of weather, we can do some weather stacks and game the payouts that way. For now, though, I think we just want to go on pure talent and how many birdies guys make, that sort of thing. So some names that pop out to me right away. Thigala, I think at 3.5 is a steal. Wish he had a higher multiplier on that, but Cam Smith, another guy that stands out to me coming down the board. Cantlay, I think makes a lot of sense at 3.5. But we also have
you haven't
more
got
than
to the guy
multipliers,
that
I should say.
I was gonna say you haven't got to the one guy with a multiplier that. So keep going. You're gonna get there eventually. Yeah. There's one that sticks out.
Cam Young at 3.5, I think, is another one that stands out. But man, Sam Burns 1.1x, and the guy we were on last week. Man, how far down do I have to go? There we go. Wyndham Clark, 1.1x, more than 3.5 birdies or better. It's hilarious that you knew exactly where I was going. We did not talk about this beforehand. The guy is a birdie machine. He fits this golf course so well with the distance and the putting. I love this pick. It's absolutely my starting spot.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that was the first one that stood out to me. You're going to give me a guy that makes a lot of birdies, that's playing well with a higher multiplier on 3.5.
Yeah,
it made a lot of sense to me.
Okay, from there, the one that stood out to me, I think, is Sam Burns at 1.1x, just because it's 1.1x. But you could very easily talk me into Thigala. You could talk me into Cam Young instead. Finau, Cantlay. What's your thought for who we should go to next?
So I actually think that from here, I'm probably, to get the boosted payout, I probably am not going to play. If we're talking about our third, just the 3-person wager, I'm probably not going to play another over. I don't see another one that I like enough to play it, if that makes sense. I do think there's a couple of intriguing unders. Phil Mickelson, 2.5 birdies. He's been struggling. The problem is, we all know that he is capable of making birdies, but that kind of stood out. I think I probably am going to lean to an under from here.
Interesting. I think there are some
Fleetwood
that I like.
Fleetwood at 4. Like, I'm more than happy to have the same exact number of birdies on a guy like Fleetwood and be able to play the lower on a guy like that. I mean, you're telling me that I can get Rory against Fleetwood in total major birdies made? Like, I don't know. That one just stands out to me. The Fleetwood one does. It's not boosted either direction, but once again, we talk about betting against ourselves, basically, where you're taking both sides of a birdie bet.
So here are my thoughts here. I think, individually speaking, just about like the probability of each one of these hitting on their own, I agree with what you're saying. But I think one of the reasons why these birdie or better higher and bogey or worse higher combinations work so well this week is because we have the very distinct, like, easy front 9, difficult back 9, very distinct downwind front 9, into the wind back 9. So because of the wind direction, like, I think this golf course really lends itself to guys making a lot of birdies, but also making their fair share of bogeys, in which case I want to go higher on each, which is, I think we've already seen that to be a really winning strategy. I don't love the idea of going higher on birdies on Wyndham and then lower on somebody else, because what if it's just the case that like 4 holes are playing so easy downwind and Wyndham does his job, makes all those easy birdies, and then the other guy does the exact same thing, and everywhere else we could be totally right about that guy just not hitting the ball close enough, not making enough putts, etc. But the conditions of the golf course just make it so that those outcomes are inversely correlated, where I don't see that inverse correlation between a higher birdies on Wyndham and a higher bogeys or worse on somebody else.
Yeah, I guess my argument there is you're basically only saying, here's your 9 holes to make a birdie. And so you're telling me that you have to birdie over half of those 9 holes. It's just not that easy. I mean, and then the par 5 on the downwind par 5 is 630 yards. So it's not like you're not playing a 500-yard par 5 straight downwind.
Yeah, 100%. It's just a correlation argument because again, on Underdog, we are getting. So remember, just for those who haven't seen this before, like if I just put in Thagala and then go to a bogeys and I go lower on Neiman, we're getting far more than the. Are we not? What did I do wrong here? Higher on bogeys, we're getting far more than the standard 6x payout. So that's what we're trying to do. We're basically getting rewarded for inverse correlation that I don't believe exists. And we can't do that if we go higher on birdies for one guy, lower on birdies on another guy. So that's the whole point of, I think, this strategy.
I thought you could do it with if you're betting the opposite side. I thought it kind of worked the same way. Does it not higher and lower?
It does, but then so if we were to go higher on birdies on Wyndham and then lower on birdies for Fleetwood, for example, we without question are including some inverse correlation in our slip. When we go higher on birdies and then higher on bogeys for Neiman, for example, we're still getting boosted, but now we're getting boosted in such a way where I don't believe that there's actually the inverse correlation that the payout suggests exists. If we go higher on birdies and lower on birdies, there's no question that inverse correlation exists.
Gotcha. I understand what you're saying now. And that makes complete sense. It's just more of, I don't understand how you can have one guy like Fleetwood that obviously is not going to make as many birdies as a Rory having the exact same number.
That's fair. Let's do this. Let's go to my favorite bogeys play, and then we can figure out the third pick. And actually, this one is, I think it shouldn't be a surprise to anybody who followed the Master Show because we did the exact same thing there, and it was an easy win. We're just picking on John Daly. We're picking on a guy who
I've already got it clicked on my phone. Like literally had already clicked it.
Yeah, the guy's shooting in the 80s every time on the Champions Tour. Like he's finishing near dead last every event on the Champions Tour, and you think he can go to a major championship golf course and not make bogeys? The only question that I have is, do we want 6.5 bogeys or worse, or do we want instead to just say more than 80.5 strokes, with the idea being he can make a 10 on a hole, and it's just like, okay, the 80.5 is done right there, whereas in the bogeys or worse, you'd still need to play 6 other bad holes. So do you have a strong preference between the two?
I mean, my first lean was the bogeys or worse.
You know what? The strokes are no longer available. So I think that decision was just made for us.
But I didn't even think about the – I think the problem with the 80.5 is if the downwind holes do play extremely easy and he makes a couple of birdies, it makes it a lot harder to get to that 80.5.
I do agree with that. Okay. So if those are the first two in, let's find that third pick. And for those unfamiliar, the reason why we want to find a third pick is because 3-pick plays are kind of the sweet spot on Underdog. 6-pick plays are fantastic. 8-pick plays, not quite as good, but they're a lot of fun. So we're going to build an 8-pick after this. But the 3-pick is just, it's where you want to be. The win probability that you need, the win percentage that you need to be profitable is a lot lower if you're doing a 3-pick play than if you're doing a bunch of 2-pick plays. So that's why we want that third one. And we can also boost the payout as well by going with a third. So either a higher on birdies or a higher on bogeys. Do you have any others that you really like? Because we could go a number of ways here. There are both birdie picks that I like, and there are bogey picks that I like.
So they just changed Daly's number. It's back up, and it's 79.5 now.
Whoa.
So I don't know if you need to refresh it or what, but on my app, it has Daly at 79.5. I don't know if that makes a difference. I just wanted to let you know.
Yeah, that does make a difference. So let's think about it this way. If Daly makes 7 bogeys, what are the chances that he breaks 79.5? It's a par 71, I believe. So we would need him to be 9 over. So we would just need 2 more doubles than birdies made in that case if he goes over. Like, to me, the chances that he shoots higher than 79.5 and makes fewer than 6.5 bogeys is a lot higher than if he makes 7 or more bogeys but shoots below 80. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And the
I think you
payout
can argue.
barely changes. It goes from 3.56 to 3.53. So we're still getting that boosted payout from the inverse correlation. So I like the higher than 79.5.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you're flipping a coin, right? I don't see one as that much stronger than the other. I just do see that. It was just funny that we were talking about it and it went down to 79.5 while we were talking about it.
Another one that we've had a lot of success on so far this major season is betting against Phil Mickelson. He has continued to play terribly on the LIV Tour. What is your opinion of higher 4.5 bogeys or worse for Phil?
See, I just like higher 73. I mean, like higher than 73 just seems like it's the other guy. Like we're on a lot of the same page with a lot of stuff right now because that's literally what I had just clicked is Mickelson over 73.
Are you more worried about Phil making a bunch of birdies than you are Daly, though? Because I think that's my hesitation.
I actually, I'm not. I don't like. I think that Phil, he might make 4 birdies, but he might make a 10. And so I think because he's going to try to hit this, he's going to try to hit the more special shot. And we're talking about 6.5 shots lower than Daly. It only takes one big number, whereas Daly can make a 10 on a par 5 and still shoot 79. If Mickelson makes a really big number somewhere, he's not breaking 73.
Yeah, that's a good point. Let's see if the payouts change at all. So 6.95x or 7.01. So no real difference there. If we wanted to go to birdies, so the one that I had been talking about was Sam Burns at 1.1x. Let's see how much better or worse that one is. Where are you, Sam? Shout out to Underdog. They have so many picks available that it's hard to find them. So I'm just going to search his name. There's the 1.1x. 7.64x for this 3-pick play. So I'll let you decide this last leg. Do we want Phil higher than 73 strokes, Phil higher than 4.5 bogeys, or Sam Burns higher than 3.5 birdies or better? Also 1.1x which would take the payout all the way up to 7.64x.
I mean, if I had to make a decision between the three, I think I would go over 73 Phil. That being said, like that extra boost in money for Sam Burns definitely does something for me there because the course fit, if it comes into because he hits it far and putts so good that if this all comes out to be fact of the way the golf course plays, then I really like that as well. Yeah,
Burns also just one of the better scorers on tour. So let me get this exact number up. 45th in bogey avoidance, 20th in birdie or better percentage. So why don't we do this? Let's make Burns the official 6 or the official 3-pick play. So Sam Burns, Wyndham Clark higher than 3.5 birdies, each 1.1x. John Daly higher than 79.5 strokes. And then as we go to make this 8-pick play, we're immediately going to start Phil Mickelson higher than 73.5 strokes as the next one in. I would also say, do we want to just continue to kind of take this like bet against the old guys route and go higher 4.0 bogeys or worse on Tiger?
I love it. 100% think that's a great play. It's so weird. It's so hurt. I feel like it just hurts my heart to be like, oh yeah, Tiger's going to make more than 4 bogeys. But, yeah, I think that you have to just think that these guys are going to struggle.
Okay, so we have the old guys struggling. Now let's get some more birdie picks to turn this into an 8-pick play with a very, very fun payout. I can't wait for you guys to see just how high this can go. First place I'm going to start is with Sahith Theegala. His 3.5 number stood out to me right away. So let's go higher 3.5 birdies on Sahith Theegala. Any others really stand out to you?
I was just kind of scrolling through these now.
Real quick, by the way, this 6-pick play is worth 35x. I'm probably going to play this one as well, 3.6x for 5 of 6. But let's turn this into an 8-pick.
I don't really have another birdie bet. I think the Koepka over bogey bet kind of stood out to me. But as far as birdie bets go, everybody's just kind of all the guys at that 4 number. If there's some of them. If they were 3.5, I think I would lean into. I mean, we haven't even talked about the Jordan Spieth over 2.5 bogeys. That's been a staple into our. Now it is 0.9 instead of the other way. But do you like the over 4 bogeys better than the over 72.5 for Tiger?
Yeah, because one thing we've seen from Tiger this major championship season, he's making a lot of bogeys, but he's doing a pretty good job of avoiding doubles and worse. So, he's just taken his medicine a lot. He's made a bunch of bogeys. Like, I think in round 1 of the US Open, we had higher than 4.5 bogeys. I think he ended up making 6, but he only made 6 bogeys, and he didn't even sniff a double bogey. So I think in that regard, I like the bogeys number more for him. And it's also one of those things where, like, because it's 4.0 versus 72.5, I don't mind the idea of maybe he only makes 4 bogeys, but that doesn't lose the entire thing for us. It just docks us from an 8 pick to a 7 pick, in which case we're still getting a really high payout if everybody else hits.
The other guy that you talked about there was Cam Young, the over 3.5 on Cam Young, and just get your opinion on that. That's the only other guy that really, really stuck out. The other, and then back to a boosted. I saw one other play that made sense to me.
So the fact that you went to Cam Young, I'm totally in on that. And there were 3 guys for the last 2 spots that are really competing for my liking. Cam Young is one of them. Minwoo Lee is one of them. We hit Minwoo Lee in round 1 last week. Another guy, just distance and putting, like that combination. Very, very few have it the way that Minwoo Lee has it. And then Cam Smith, just because he's a magician and makes a ton of putts. So I think Cam Young and Minwoo Lee would be my choice, but you could definitely talk me into Cam Smith. And it sounds like you had some other boosted guy in mind. So do you have any idea who
the other boosted guy was a bogeys bet, though. It was Rahm over 2.5 bogeys. If he continues to struggle like he has struggled and gets frustrated like he did last week, a boosted over 2.5 Rahm could really make this payout nice.
It definitely could. Do you have any preference on those birdie guys?
I'm good with any of those 3. I like where your head is, all 3 of them. I feel like that Underdog values the live guys more than say DraftKings.
I agree 100%. What do you think of you were really high on Cantlay in the outright market. Are you as high on him for 3.5 birdies?
I think that we'll know early on of how he's going to play. I think he's hard to figure out round to round. So it doesn't really I like some of the guys like a Cam Young or a Minwoo Lee better than I like him.
Interesting. He's 69th in bogey avoidance, 23rd in birdie or better percentage. So it's one of the reasons why I bring him up. Let's check those numbers on Cam Young, Cam Smith. We won't be able to check it for Cam Smith, but let's check it for Cam Young and Minwoo Lee, and then maybe that will give us a final answer. So I know that Cam Young is a great scorer, 142nd in bogey avoidance, 21st in birdie or better rate. Absolutely hilarious. And then Minwoo Lee, I think he's another guy who really favors making birdies instead of avoiding bogeys, but let's double check that. 112th in bogey avoidance, 63rd in birdie or better percentage. So confirmed, but I'll give you the final say here. Let's pick 2 of those 3: Cam Young, Minwoo Lee, Patrick Cantlay. What's your lean?
Well, it sounded like I didn't realize that he was that high. Cantlay is 23rd in birdies or better. That makes that an easy choice for me there. And then you can flip a coin for the other 2. I'm good with either one. I think
I like Minwoo and Cantlay.
Okay, that sounds good to me. I think my lean would be Minwoo as well, just because of the talent level, knowing that he can make a ton of birdies and how far he hits it.
I'm a little bit afraid of Cam Young's putter in this regard, and we're kind of leaning in with all the other picks, with Wyndham Clark, with Sam Burns. We're leaning into this idea of distance off the tee and the ability to make a lot of putts. Minwoo Lee and Cantlay both fit that quite well. Cam Young obviously has the distance aspect of that, but doesn't make anywhere near as many putts. Same idea, but reverse for Cam Smith. Cam Smith doesn't have the distance, even though he makes putts. So I think this play makes a ton of sense. 8-pick play, 94.6x. Let me zoom out for you guys so you can see the full ticket here. John Daly, higher, 79.5 strokes. Sam Burns, higher, 3.5 birdies. Wyndham Clark, higher, 3.5 birdies. Mickelson, higher, 73 strokes. Tiger, higher, 4.0 bogeys. Thigala, Minwoo Lee, Patrick Cantlay, higher, 3.5 birdies. 95x. That would be one heck of a way to start off the Open Championship. Should be a fun week, Justin.
Yeah, and I think that I've noticed myself having maybe a little bit more success with the second and third round with Underdog than I have the first round, because you kind of get a better feel of how it's going to play. I think that's going to be a thing that everybody has to pay attention to. We've talked about the whole time, is how predictive or how unpredictable the weather is.
Yeah, I mean it's a double-edged sword, right? Because on the one hand, it becomes a lot easier for us to predict what's going to happen. It also becomes easier for Underdog and Prize Picks to set lines, though. So do have to keep that in mind. But so those are our plays already. And as I said earlier, we will come up with another wave of plays once we actually get tee times and have a good sense of where the weather will be most favorable, least favorable, etc. With that, let's have ourselves a great Open Championship. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we will catch you next time.